Welcome to the Liberty Cast, and I'm your host, Big E. We're trying something new this week. In case you're listening, we added video to the podcast. We still have our audio portion, so you'll still be able to listen how you normally do. But now you can find us on YouTube and watch the show as well. This is very exciting for us, and I hope you enjoy it as we grow and offer more and exciting new content. Anyway, I hope everyone had a great Independence Day celebration, sans masks. I hope everyone took the mask mandates and shelter-in-place orders imposed by tyrannical leftist governors, mayors, and city councils, and paid them the attention that they so richly deserve, which is to say, absolutely none. Now, over the weekend, I took the smoker out for its maiden voyage. The ribs came out fantastic for a first try. The brisket, not so much. Anyway, though, live and learn. Now, since we weren't with you last week, there's a lot I want to talk about, but I know we're not going to get to it all. So the focus this week is going to be on what I see as an overarching issue under which all the other issues we're facing fall, like the Chinese coronavirus, mask mandates, more economic shutdowns, and a new tactic in the left's fight to get our guns, just to name a few. So we will examine all of that and much more straight ahead. Folks, I've said this before, and I will continue to say it until more of us understand that we are currently engaged in ideological warfare. This is the umbrella issue under which all of these other issues fall. This is not your grandfather's or even your father's typical Republican-Democrat debate. The left's new mantra is dismantle the system, tear down the system. Remember the Black Lives Matter leader, I believe Hawk Newsom, a couple of weeks ago said that if they don't get what they want, they're going to burn it down. Apparently that begins with tearing down statues of racists. Now the tearing down of the statues of Confederate soldiers like Robert E. Lee and Henry Watkins Allen, Confederate Navy Admiral Raphael Sims, and other Confederate monuments, I understand. I don't agree, but I understand to a degree the rationale. Supposedly, this is a necessary step to help fight systemic racism, but we'll get to that in a second. But not only are they tearing down Confederate statues, they got Ulysses S. Grant, Abraham Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation statue that was paid for by freed slaves, statues of abolitionists like Hans Christian Heg, and of all people, Frederick Douglass. So is there something, a message in this destruction? And yeah, there is. It's an incoherent one, and I'll try to help you make some sense of it. But Black Lives Matter is leading this charge. They're Marxists. Their website is littered with Marxist ideology. Now, we played for you a couple of weeks ago audio of one of the founders admitting this. Another co-founder, Opal Tometi, proudly had her picture taken with Venezuela's dictator Nicolas Maduro. Now, Karl Marx's theory of history was that it was an obstacle to the proletariat gaining power. I know that's a very simplistic explanation, but in the interest of time, I just wanted to break it down as simply as I could. But that's why they're tearing down these statues. Now, leftists who sympathize say, this isn't erasing history. You can still read books and learn about it in school. Okay. But leftists run the schools, and all you have to do is flip through a history textbook to see that they are omitting information and in some cases teaching complete falsehoods. And that's not even, that's it's not going to stop at statues. It didn't stop at Lee and Confederate memorials. Washington and Jefferson statues soon followed, along with Lincoln and Douglas. It's not going to stop until we stop it. Now, we could talk about this for hours, but I want to circle back to the systemic racism myth, which is another front in this war. I think I've pretty well debunked the systemic racism myth in several previous shows, but let's come at it from a different perspective this time. So if you buy into the premise that systemic racism or institutional racism exists, then you have to believe that it's not just Black Americans who are suffering at the hands of this scourge. But when you look at Black immigrants, such as immigrants from Africa or the Caribbean, they don't seem to suffer the consequences that Black Lives Matter claims arise from being Black. A story from Newsweek back in 2017 titled "Racism in Boston" reported that the median Black household had only $8 of wealth. What the Newsweek story didn't highlight very well, they mentioned it but didn't highlight it very well, was that the $8 amount was specific to Black Bostonians born in the United States. Black Bostonians of Caribbean descent had $12,000 of wealth, even though they had nearly identical levels of education and rates of college graduation. So can you tell the difference between a Black person born here in the United States versus a Jamaican or a Haitian or a Nigerian just by looking at them? Now, I know the study didn't include African immigrants. I wish it had. But I just included the African nation to drive home the point, which is that you can't. Now, I know once they speak, you can, but if the systemic racism existed, it shouldn't matter what accent a Black person has. Black skin should be all a racist needs to discriminate against you, correct? But the very concept of systemic racism suggests that Black folks have no agency. They can't do anything, and it's all in the hands of these nebulous systems or institutions, again, all controlled by leftists who support Black Lives Matter and are so tolerant and such allies of the Black community. Please. Now, the other front in this ideological war is the tyrannical method the leftists are employing to combat the Chinese coronavirus. I know that was a pretty hard left, but we are seeing a spike in Chinese coronavirus cases in the past few weeks. But before we get into what may be causing it, let me just mention that early on in the pandemic, I talked about Sweden and their response to the pandemic. Sweden was the model that conservatives looked to and wanted our officials to mirror. I know I did. They had more respect for their citizens' liberty in Sweden than we did here in the United States, where liberty is supposed to be a guiding principle. Now, they're seeing a spike in cases as well, but just like here, the mortality rate is declining. The leftist media is trying to spin it as to suggest that Sweden made a mistake by not closing down the economy like many other countries did. Because of the spike in cases, travel from Sweden and to other Nordic countries has been restricted, but again, just like here, the spike is attributed to more and better testing, while the number of hospitalizations and deaths are again going down. So what was the purported goal of the lockdowns in the beginning again? To flatten the curve so as not to overwhelm hospitals, and then the economy was supposed to open back up. Well, hospitals were never close to being overwhelmed. In fact, they were decidedly underwhelmed. Hospitals closed because the only thing they were treating was the Chinese coronavirus. The hospital ship, the USS Comfort, at the Navy Center dock in New York to help out, saw fewer than 200 patients. Meanwhile, no elective procedures were being done, no cancer screenings, no cancer treatments, no physicals, nothing else was being done. Fast forward to now, states trying to reopen their economies. and some are now seeing spikes in positive cases and hospitalizations. Texas, Florida, Arizona, California, just to name a few. And the obvious comparison is similar to the one between the United States and Sweden. They took completely different approaches, but ended up with similar outcomes. Texas and Florida took a much more relaxed approach to curtailing the liberty of their citizens, while California and Arizona took a much more totalitarian tack. Yet they're all seeing significant spike in cases. Why? Now, I'd like to see some data on whether or not any of the people being treated or hospitalized with the virus are illegal aliens, because those are all border states. But we'll set that aside for now and focus on what happened between the initial lockdowns and now. And we will do that right after this. So what's causing the spike? After the death of George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks, a series of protests nationwide kicked off, where rioters and looters, call them what they are, were not wearing masks, not socially distancing, and obviously not sheltering in place because they were out rioting. All the things they told us we had to do to stop the spread went bye-bye. All the fear-mongering about how bad this virus is also had the effect of keeping people out of doctors' offices and neglecting treatment of conditions besides the Chinese coronavirus, a situation to which I alluded earlier. So people are now being hospitalized for other serious conditions that might not have progressed to this point where they needed to be hospitalized and had been able to get treatment earlier on. Now, that's not speculation on my part. This is from a doctor at a hospital in Texas. An email he sent to Alex Berenson, who he's been on this Chinese coronavirus nonsense from the beginning. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that Alex Berenson probably disagrees with me and most people listening on pretty much everything politically. He's no conservative by any stretch, but he saw through the scare tactics from the beginning. But here's a quote from that email. Once the restriction on elective procedures was lifted, many patients scheduled for those procedures and so are hospitalized. The other thing is that people really were not going to the doctor or the hospital for fear of COVID, and now they are sicker from other causes that didn't get treated. Between this dynamic and the protests that are being allowed to continue, the spike that we're seeing shouldn't surprise anyone. And of course, as a result of this new spike, they're trying to shut the economy down once again, issuing mandates to wear masks and trying to keep children out of school. Even when there is little to no evidence, no data to suggest that masks work. And just anecdotally, have you seen the way people wear these masks? They don't have them covering their noses, and while they have them on, they're touching their face, and while some people are just wearing bandanas or other makeshift face coverings because that's going to stop the virus. And I've heard multiple reports of people taking them off as they cough or sneeze in order to cover their mouth with their hand or elbow. What sense does that make? What's the point? Doctors all agree that if you're not going to wear one properly, there's no point in wearing one at all. So many people have just rolled over and shown their bellies to the government and the mask holes who tell you that you're a bad person if you don't wear one. Again, it's not about your safety. It never has been. It's about your obedience. Not only is there no data suggesting that masks work, but let's circle back to the issue of opening schools back up. The CDC says that there is no evidence to suggest that children are at higher risk with this virus. And even the exalted Dr. Anthony Fauci has said that there is no reason to keep children out of school. Now, to be fair, the studies on children and their susceptibility and how they spread the virus, how sick they get if they contract the virus, is limited. But what is available suggests that children are at very low risk. All right, moving on. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, I open the show, and the theme today is this ideological war that we're fighting. Now, the left has been waging war on our Second Amendment rights for a long time now, but the entire Constitution, really. But check out this latest salvo from them on guns. A group of researchers from UC Davis conducted a study where they posed the question of whether or not the surge in firearm purchases lately is associated with changes in interpersonal firearm violence, a long-winded way to say gun violence. And it's a reasonable question, I suppose, but we don't have any data from these most recent months to make that determination. And of course, history is not on their side. And we know this by looking at the FBI's uniform crime reports over the past 10 years. That violent crime is down and has gone down every year from 2009 to 2018. And obviously the surge in firearm sales is due to the pandemic and the fear from the beginning that the social fabric was going to break down and lead to people being robbed for their food and things of that nature. It's actually happened in the very beginning, and I talked about this on the show. I believe it was in Lake Tahoe, the crime hub that it is over there, where a woman was robbed of her groceries as she was leaving the grocery store. So all of the things that sound crazy and you think could never happen can absolutely happen. And we're seeing them happen in many facets of life right now. People want to be able to protect themselves and their families. They didn't purchase these guns to go out and commit crimes. That's just ridiculous. But here's the thing. This pandemic is only a few months old. So what data are they using for this study? The NICS background checks, which are conducted for every firearm purchase, and that's fine. But there's no FBI crime stats because they won't be out for this year until late 2021. So they're using the Gun Violence Archives collection of media reports rather than actual crime data. Now, I don't have to tell you why that pretty much renders any conclusions made by this study moot, do I? No? Good. Because the part of the study that I really want to focus on is that the authors use this term excess purchases. Excess purchases to describe what's happening during the surge in gun sales. What does that even mean? What constitutes excess? Who determines what constitutes excess? Now, if you're familiar with guns, you know that people have different guns for all different purposes and reasons. You may carry a smaller pistol in the summertime for easier concealment in shorts and t-shirts and tank tops. Women may have a few different pistols because certain ones may be easier to conceal with certain outfits. People who hunt have different rifles for the various game that they hunt. And some people buy different guns because they're freaking cool. And they can. Or they just want the latest and greatest. The reason should be of absolutely no consequence. But the Shannon Wattses and the Comrade de Blasios of the world don't see it that way. Mark my words, you will be hearing this term from anti-Constitution gun confiscators very, very soon. Speaking of the Comrade, let me just tie this in real quick. You know what, actually, let's go ahead and take another break, and we'll finish up with the Comrade and then get you out of here with some epic stupidity, which is a prize that Comrade could claim, but this just isn't his week. Crazy, right? We'll be right back. So New York has seen a huge spike in crime since the comrades shut down the anti-crime unit. That's the plainclothes unit that patrols the streets, or patrolled the streets, and when they observe crimes, would make the arrest right then and there. This is going on in a city that makes it nearly impossible for law-abiding citizens to purchase, own, or carry weapons, guns, while at the same time eliminating bail so that criminals get processed, issued a summons, or I think it's called a desk appearance ticket in New York, and sent on their merry way to commit the same crime they just got arrested for a few hours ago. Is there anything about that that makes any sense or suggests that your safety is of any concern to them? They take away or severely limit your ability to protect yourself while taking hundreds of police officers off the street that could be helping to prevent crime, and then letting criminals back out onto the street with no real consequences after their arrest. And let's not forget that they let murderers and level 3 sex offenders out of prison due to fears that they might contract the Chinese coronavirus while incarcerated. Come on. This is not about your safety at all. It's about their power in keeping you compliant. So what are you going to do about it? All right, let's get you out of here with some epic level stupidity. And I have 2 selections for you, both from the same guy. And here's the first one. Check this out.
I'm not an activist. I'm speaking from and this isn't my opinion. This is fact. So I'm speaking from my point of view as a black man in this society. And so if you want to say that that's activism, then fine, you can say that. I don't believe that's activism. I believe that is telling the truth, and that is my role as a journalist. There are certain times when you have to say, okay, well, here's what the other side is saying, right? And there are certain times as a journalist that I have to play devil's advocate, but I don't believe that in this moment anymore. And I don't believe that with this administration. There's truth or there's not truth. There's reality and there's not reality. So that's how I feel about that.
That had to be the most incoherent blather I've heard from one of these so-called journalists in a long time. And I don't understand why he's so resistant to calling himself an opinion guy. Look at Rachel Maddow. She basically does the same thing that Donnie does, but at least she's honest with herself and her audience. We know she has a bias, and she freely admits it. But old Donnie, he wasn't done. He had another case of mouth diarrhea. Check this out.
Jesus Christ, if that's who you believe in, Jesus Christ, admittedly was not perfect when he was here on this earth. So why are we deifying the founders of this country?
Okay, I admit, I don't go to church these days, and I should. But I did grow up in church, and I know a fair bit about the Bible. I can't quote a ton of scripture like a lot of people can. But I know this. Jesus Christ was perfect. He died on the cross because we're not perfect, and believing in him is our only path to salvation and everlasting life. Whoever admitted to him that Jesus Christ wasn't perfect, clearly, obviously not a Christian. That much I can guarantee. I mean, the stupidity is strong with this one. I don't know. Anyway, folks, that's our show. Thank you for checking us out today, whether it's on audio or you are seeing us on the YouTube channel. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody. Thank you for checking out the Liberty Cast. You can find us on the web at thelibertycast.net, on an affiliate site, therightway.site. We're also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Parler. It's at the Liberty Cast on all 4 of those platforms. And we also have a new YouTube channel, so please head over to YouTube and search for us there, subscribe, and leave some comments.